We like to think of ourselves as the pinnacle of civilization. We've split the atom, walked on the moon, and created tiny computers that fit in our pockets, and somehow know exactly when we're talking about pizza so they can show us pizza ads. But here's the uncomfortable truth. For all our technological advancement, we're still making rules that are so spectacularly, hilariously stupid that future generations will wonder if we were all collectively having a stroke when we wrote them. Today, we're diving into 50 of the absolute dumbest laws ever committed to paper. These aren't just old, forgotten regulations gathering dust in some legal archive. These are real statutes that actual human beings with actual law degrees sat down, debated, voted on, and decided were necessary to protect society. By the end of this video, you'll realize that the biggest bug in the system of human civilization has never been technology or resources. It's always been us. So buckle up, because we're about to take a journey through the most gloriously absurd legal madness the human mind has ever produced. Let's start with something. That sounds like a rejected premise from a children's cartoon. In the state of Ohio, it is literally a crime to get a fish drunk. Not metaphorically drunk, not drunk with power or some poetic nonsense. We're talking about actual intoxication of an actual fish. This isn't buried in some vague environmental protection statute. This is a specific, standalone law that targets the deliberate act of making a fish consume alcohol. The real question here isn't whether the law exists. It's what catastrophic event in Ohio's history made lawmakers look at each other and say, "We need to protect our aquatic wildlife from alcoholism." Was there a rogue gang of teenagers conducting fish keg parties in Lake Erie? Did someone's pet goldfish develop a drinking problem that made local news? We may never know the origin story, but somewhere in Ohio, the fish are swimming safely, protected by law from the dangers of a crippling hangover and the shame of drunk dialing their ex-guppies. Now, if you think that's weird, let me introduce you to bureaucratic overreach at its absolute finest. In the United Kingdom, specifically within the Houses of Parliament, it is illegal to die. Yes, you read that correctly. Dying within the Palace of Westminster is technically against the law. Before you start wondering how exactly they plan to arrest a corpse, let me explain the twisted logic. Anyone who has the audacity to die within the walls of Parliament is technically entitled to a state funeral, complete with all the pomp, circumstance, and taxpayer money that entails. Rather than deal with the logistical nightmare of throwing a national ceremony every time some elderly lord dozes off permanently during a particularly boring debate about agricultural subsidies, the government simply made dying there illegal. It's the ultimate preemptive strike, a law that says, we know we can't actually stop this from happening, but we're going to make it your problem, not ours. Speaking of things that shouldn't be possible, let's talk about the time a Swedish man decided his kitchen was the perfect place to build a nuclear reactor. In 2011, this gentleman legally purchased radioactive materials online, because apparently the internet really will sell you anything, and began conducting his own personal fusion experiments while documenting the entire process on a blog. When he called Sweden's Radiation Safety Authority to politely inquire whether splitting atoms in his apartment was permissible, they immediately sent the police. The authorities were so utterly bewildered by the situation that they had to scramble to figure out what to even charge him with. They eventually settled on unlawful possession of nuclear material, a charge usually reserved for rogue states and international terrorists, not bored physics enthusiasts with too much time and an Amazon account. Let's head over to Fairbanks, Alaska, where the local government has taken a very firm stance on a very specific issue. It is illegal, according to city ordinance, to serve alcoholic beverages to a moose. This isn't folklore. This isn't an urban legend your uncle tells at Thanksgiving. This is an actual law that was passed after a local moose, affectionately nicknamed Buzzwinkle, became infamous for getting absolutely hammered on fermented crab apples and then terrorizing the town. In another incident, A different intoxicated moose got tangled in Christmas lights and spent several hours stumbling around residential neighborhoods like a four-legged wrecking ball wearing a holiday costume. The city council decided the only rational solution was to make it illegal to be a moose's bartender. So, if you're in Fairbanks and a moose sidles up to your backyard bar and asks for a beer, you are legally obligated to check his ID and then refuse service. Some laws protect you from criminals. Some laws protect you from yourself. And then there's this beautifully specific piece of Nevada legislation that protects desperate gamblers from hitting the absolute lowest point imaginable. In Las Vegas, it is illegal to pawn your own dentures. Let that image sink in for just a moment. Picture someone so deep in gambling debt, so convinced that the next hand of blackjack will turn everything around, that they're willing to walk out of a pawn shop with a mouthful of gums and a handful of cash. This law exists specifically to prevent people from making that exact decision. It's the legal system's way of saying, we'll let you lose your house, your car, and your dignity, but we draw the line at your teeth. Now let's travel to Western Australia, where for decades you could have been arrested for the heinous crime of potato trafficking. Under the Potato Marketing Corporation Act of 1946, it was illegal to sell, deliver, or even possess more than 50 kilograms. That's about 110 pounds of potatoes without government approval. The government had created a state-run potato monopoly, and to enforce it, they created actual potato police who could stop and search your vehicle if they suspected you were smuggling illicit spuds. This created an underground black market for potatoes, with clandestine deals happening in dark alleys, hushed conversations about the shipment, and criminals cutting potatoes with cheaper root vegetables to maximize profit. Somewhere in Australia, there's a guy who did hard time for French fry futures. And that's the world we live in. The state of Oklahoma has decided to officially acknowledge the existence of Bigfoot, which is already a bold choice, but they've taken it a step further. A recent bill proposed establishing an official Bigfoot hunting season, complete with a $25,000 bounty. But here's the catch. You have to capture Bigfoot alive and unharmed. The bill was designed to boost tourism, which means Oklahoma's official economic development strategy involves gently apprehending a mythical 800-pound ape man without hurting his feelings. I want you to think about the logistics here. You've somehow found Bigfoot. You've confirmed he exists, and now you have to politely ask him to come with you without using force, like you're serving a very hairy, very large subpoena. Switzerland, a country known for precision watches and neutrality, has extended its legal protections to guinea pigs. It is against the law to own just one guinea pig because they are social creatures and owning a single one constitutes animal abuse through loneliness. But the Swiss didn't stop at the law. They thought through the consequences. What happens when one of your legally mandated pair dies? To solve this problem, Switzerland has actual businesses that rent temporary companion guinea pigs. You can rent a friend for your grieving pet until you're ready to commit to a new permanent roommate. It's guinea pig Tinder, but government-mandated and slightly more depressing. Here's a law that reads like it was written by a very confused time traveler. In Florida, it is illegal for an unmarried woman to parachute on a Sunday. Let me be clear about the specificity here. Married women? Parachute away, men, married or single. Jump to your heart's content. Literally any other day of the week. Perfectly fine. But if you are a single woman and it's the Lord's Day, jumping out of an airplane is a criminal offense punishable by fine or jail time. The origin of this law has been completely lost to history, leaving us to wonder what combination of events, bachelorette party, Sunday church service, and aviation incident caused lawmakers to target this incredibly narrow demographic. Ohio makes a second appearance on our list, with a law so specific it feels like the result of a very weird bet. It is illegal to use a fish for the purpose of dueling. This isn't part of animal cruelty legislation. This is a specific clause in Ohio's fishing regulations. The law lists illegal methods of catching fish, including firearms, chemicals, and personal combat. That means if you and your rival decide to settle your differences by slapping each other with trout until someone yields, you're not just being ridiculous. You're violating state fishing codes. Somewhere, a very confused game warden had to write a citation for unauthorized fish-based dueling, and I desperately want to read that police report. What is a sandwich? It seems like a simple question until a judge has to answer it. In Massachusetts, a Panera Bread franchise tried to prevent a Qdoba from opening in the same shopping mall by citing a lease clause that prohibited other sandwich shops. This escalated into an actual court case where a judge had to legally define whether a burrito qualifies as a sandwich. After careful legal deliberation, reviewing precedents, and probably questioning every decision that led to this moment, the court ruled that burritos, along with tacos and quesadillas, are not sandwiches, in part because they're typically served hot and contain fillings not traditionally associated with sandwiches. Thousands of dollars in legal fees were spent so that a judge could officially declare that Mexican food is not, in fact, a sandwich. Want to sell flowers in Louisiana? Better have a license. For decades, Louisiana was the only state that required a government-issued florist license. To get one, you had to pass a subjective practical exam judged by other licensed florists who had a direct financial interest in limiting their competition. Aspiring florists were rejected because their arrangements lacked proper focal point or failed to demonstrate adequate design principles. After years of legal challenges, the law was struck down, but not before it created a state-sanctioned cartel that controlled who was allowed to arrange flowers for money. In Florida, if you're planning to ride your horse into town, you'd better bring quarters. State law requires that if you tie a horse, mule, or goat to a parking meter, you must pay the meter fee, just like any car. This law is a beautiful artifact from when horses and automobiles shared the road, ensuring that regardless of your transportation method, nobody gets free parking. I'm now imagining a very dedicated meter maid writing tickets for horses, and honestly, that's the energy we need in law enforcement. Oklahoma tried to regulate beer temperature, and the results were exactly as stupid as you'd expect. Until 2018, a law mandated that any beer stronger than 3.2% alcohol could only be sold warm. If you wanted a cold, strong beer, you couldn't buy it at a grocery store. The logic was that warm beer is less appealing and would discourage impulse drinking. The state literally made good beer worse by law, forcing citizens to either drink weak beer or plan their purchases hours in advance so they could refrigerate their legally mandated warm beer. Pennsylvania has made it a crime to tell fortunes. An old but actively enforced law makes it a misdemeanor to pretend to use occult powers to predict the future or locate lost property. This has led to police sting operations where undercover officers get their palms read and then immediately arrest the psychic for making predictions. Imagine being arrested because a cop asked about their love life and you said, "I see romance in your future." And they slapped handcuffs on you for illegal soothsaying. In Iceland, major construction projects have been rerouted because of elves. Belief in the hidden people is so culturally ingrained that rocks and hills thought to be elf homes receive informal legal protection. The Icelandic Road Administration has an actual process for dealing with claims that a highway project will destroy elf habitats. Multi-million-dollar infrastructure projects have been redesigned because the public protested that the original route would anger the elves. It's a country where civil engineering has to account for folklore. And honestly, I respect the commitment. After a failed Scottish rebellion in 1746, the British government declared bagpipes to be a weapon of war. Because the pipes were used to rally troops and signal commands in battle, English courts ruled they were instruments of war, not music. For a period of time, simply owning or playing bagpipes could get you executed. The government looked at a musical instrument and said, "That's too dangerous to exist," which is the most British overreaction to losing a battle I've ever heard. In Carmel by the Sea, California, you might need a permit to wear high heels. A municipal code forbids wearing heels over 2 inches tall without a permit from City Hall. This isn't fashion fascism, it's legal protection. The law was created in the 1920s to prevent lawsuits from women who tripped on the town's notoriously uneven sidewalks. If you're wearing unpermitted heels and you fall, you can't sue. The permits are free, but the fact that they exist is peak California absurdity. Nebraska has a law that forced bars to become restaurants through the power of soup. It was illegal to sell beer unless you were also brewing a kettle of soup. This was a legal loophole. By keeping soup on the stove, a bar could classify itself as a restaurant and get around stricter tavern regulations. It created a generation of bartenders who had to worry about their minestrone as much as their beer taps, all because lawmakers thought soup made drinking more respectable. This next law was born from pure rage. In 1924, Arizona made it illegal for a donkey to sleep in a bathtub. Picture this. A flash flood hits. A farmer brings his donkey inside for safety. The donkey discovers the sublime comfort of a cast-iron tub and refuses to leave. For weeks, the farmer can't bathe because his donkey has claimed the tub as his personal sanctuary. Finally, in desperation, the farmer storms down to the town council and demands they criminalize his donkey's bathtub addiction. And they did. That's the power of spite. In Washington, D.C., it's illegal to dance at the Jefferson Memorial. This seems ridiculous until you realize it was tested in court in 2011 when people were arrested for dancing there. A federal judge upheld the arrests, ruling that the memorial is a place of solemn reflection, not a dance floor. So if you feel the rhythm, make sure you're not near a founding father's statue, or you might end up in handcuffs. In Huesca, Spain, an ancient law requires all citizens to be skilled at playing the lyre. This dates back to Roman times when the town was a center for arts education. While it's not enforced, it was never repealed, meaning technically, being bad at ancient string instruments could make you a criminal, which is the most pretentious form of law-breaking imaginable. The Tennessee state constitution bans atheists from holding public office. The law explicitly forbids anyone who denies the existence of God or a divine afterlife from serving. The Supreme Court made this completely unenforceable in 1961, but Tennessee never removed it from their constitution. It remains as a legal ghost, a law that's simultaneously the supreme rule of the state and in total violation of federal constitutional rights. In Venice, feeding pigeons in St. Mark's Square can cost you up to €700. The city was spending a fortune cleaning up bird droppings that were literally eating away at priceless marble statues and historical buildings. What was once a beloved tourist tradition is now one of the most expensive snacks you'll ever buy, turning a handful of breadcrumbs into a financial catastrophe. Barcelona treats spitting with the seriousness of a major crime. The city has aggressive public ordinances that make spitting in public a major offense, with fines higher than parking violations. This is actively enforced as part of a civic cleanliness campaign, meaning a single wayward bit of phlegm can cost you more than a nice dinner, making public spitting perhaps the world's most expensive bad habit. Japan had to make it illegal for companies to overwork their employees to death. The work-style reform law sets strict limits on overtime and imposes fines on companies that violate it. This law was created to combat karoshi, a Japanese term for death by overwork, which had become a national epidemic. The government literally had to force people to go home from the office because the culture of work was killing them. It's a law that says, stop working or we'll fine your boss, which is possibly the saddest necessary legislation ever written. If you build an artificial island in international waters, you're legally required to install a lighthouse. According to maritime law, any man-made stationary structure in the ocean must have a warning light for ships. It doesn't matter if your island is a research platform or a libertarian micronation built from old oil drums. If it's in the ocean and doesn't move, it needs a lighthouse. It's a building code for seasteaders and ambitious eccentrics. Thanks to the 19th century Comstock Act, it's technically illegal to mail postcards containing scurrilous language. This anti-obscenity law gave postmasters incredible power to censor mail. A grumpy vacation postcard saying, "The hotel manager is a thief," could theoretically be deemed illegal, making the Postal Service the official arbiter of your vacation complaints. In 2007, China passed a law requiring Buddhist monks to get government permission to reincarnate. The official name is Management Measures for the Reincarnation of Living Buddhas, and it's widely seen as a political tool to control the selection of the next Dalai Lama. It's the single most audacious attempt by a bureaucracy to regulate the afterlife and the soul's eternal journey. In Maryland, it's illegal to bring a lion to the movies. Not all large animals, not all exotic pets, specifically lions. You can bring a dog, maybe a ferret, but the line is drawn firmly at lions. The origin is unknown, leaving us to wonder what cinematic catastrophe involving a lion made this law necessary. In 1992, Singapore banned all chewing gum. Vandals were sticking gum on subway door sensors, causing delays. Instead of targeting the vandals, the government declared war on gum itself. It's like finding one ant in your kitchen and deciding to ban sugar for the entire country. It's governmental overreaction at its finest. In Marion, Ohio, it's illegal to eat a donut while walking backwards. There's no explanation. No context, just a simple, elegant prohibition against reverse donut consumption. Was there an epidemic of people moonwalking into traffic while eating crullers? We'll never know, but in Marion, please face forward while eating pastries. In the UK, it's a crime to be drunk in charge of a cow. The Licensing Act of 1872 makes it illegal to be intoxicated while operating a cow, horse, carriage, or steam engine. It was a serious Victorian-era public safety legislation designed to prevent drunk farmers from causing chaos, and it remains on the books protecting British citizens from inebriated livestock management. Switzerland has legally recognized the dignity of plants. Their constitution contains a principle that's been interpreted to mean you cannot arbitrarily harm or humiliate a plant. While you can still mow your lawn, a scientist who decapitated flowers for no valid reason could theoretically face charges. It's a nation that decided yelling at your ficus might be a moral crime. Boulder, Colorado, has banned outdoor couches. It's illegal to keep upholstered furniture like couches on porches or lawns visible to the public. This law cleaned up student neighborhoods after years of college kids dragging decaying furniture outside. It's the world's most specific anti-frat house legislation. In 19th century New York City, firefighters had to meet a minimum height requirement of 5 feet 7 inches. This wasn't about reaching high places. It was a political weapon used by Tammany Hall to discriminate against Irish immigrants who were statistically shorter. It weaponized a measuring tape to enforce prejudice. Wisconsin nearly mandated cheese with apple pie. The apple pie law required restaurants serving apple pie to offer it with cheese. While the mandatory part was relaxed, it was a push by the dairy lobby to promote Wisconsin cheese. It's the government's official stance that apple pie needs cheddar. Pacific Grove, California, made it illegal to molest or interfere with monarch butterflies. The town, nicknamed Butterfly Town, USA, actively enforces this with fines up to $1,000. You can face serious legal penalties for being too friendly with an insect. For over 200 years, women in Paris were technically criminals for wearing pants. A law from 1799 required women to get police permits to wear trousers. Rarely enforced in modern times, it stayed on the books until it was finally repealed in 2013, ending a 2-century fashion crime. In Oklahoma, it's illegal to read comic books while driving. This isn't part of general distracted driving laws. It's a standalone statute from an era when lawmakers feared drivers getting so absorbed in Superman that they'd crash. It's the official government declaration that cartoons are dangerously captivating. Texas requires windshield wipers but not windshields. The transportation code mandates every vehicle have wipers but doesn't require the actual windshield. This creates the perfectly legal scenario of driving in rain, getting soaked while wipers swish through empty air. Its legislative oversight as art, Iowa made it illegal for one-armed piano players to charge for performances. This surgically precise law says a one-armed pianist specifically cannot accept payment. Two-armed pianists using one hand? Fine. One-armed guitarists? Rock on. But one-armed pianists? Your art is legally worthless. The origin is lost, leaving it as an insulting monument to legislative nonsense. Rehoboth Beach, Delaware made whispering in church illegal. Not shouting, not disrupting, but quiet whispering during service is a town ordinance violation. It's a relic from when absolute silence during worship was a matter of public order. Connecticut legally defines pickles by their ability to bounce. According to FDA regulations, for a cucumber to be sold as a pickle, it must bounce. This originated from a 1948 case where inspectors dropped a pickle and it splattered instead of bouncing. The bounce test became the official standard for pickle legitimacy. During World War II, Army Air Corps pilots needed specific teeth. Regulations required at least 4 incisor teeth, 3 upper and 3 lower, that occluded properly, so pilots could bite open ammunition packets in emergencies. Life or death decisions came down to tooth alignment. Quebec's Bill 11 requires French text on commercial signs to be at least twice as large as English. This creates a unique landscape where you see a huge café with a tiny coffee shop underneath, all measured with rulers to protect cultural identity through font size regulations. Don't put ice cream in your back pocket in Kentucky. This anti-horse theft measure prevented thieves from luring horses away with sweet treats. Unless you want to explain to a judge you weren't stealing horses, just storing dessert, weirdly, keep ice cream in your hands. In London, the Metropolitan Police Act of 1839 makes it illegal to beat or shake carpets in the street after 8 a.m. Doormats are fine before 8. This is a Victorian-era ghost law from before vacuum cleaners, when the only way to clean rugs was to hang them outside and whack them, showering pedestrians with dust. Houston, Texas is the largest U.S. city with 0 zoning laws. This is deliberate policy. There are no rules separating commercial, industrial, and residential areas. Skyscrapers can be built next to tiny homes. Nightclubs can open across from churches. It's a massive experiment in free market urban planning, creating beautifully chaotic landscapes. All right, we've covered 49 entries of pure legislative chaos, and there's just one more to go. But before we get to number 50, it's time for the final verdict. In my opinion, the award for the single most mind-bendingly stupid law from today's entire list has to go to China's requirement that Buddhist monks get government permission to reincarnate. Why? Because regulating something as profoundly spiritual and unknowable as the afterlife, forcing an immortal soul to file paperwork with bureaucrats before continuing its eternal journey, represents a level of governmental hubris that is simultaneously terrifying, hilarious, and so absurdly ambitious it almost demands respect. It's a law that looks at the mysteries of consciousness, death, and rebirth and says, yeah, we're gonna need you to submit that in triplicate. That is peak human arrogance codified into law. But here's the thing. I want to know what you think. Do you agree with my choice? Or did another law from today's list deserve this dubious honor? Was it the Swedish kitchen nuclear reactor? The Chinese reincarnation permits? The Maryland movie theater lions? Let me know your pick in the comments right now, because I genuinely want to see which law broke your brain the hardest. And now, for our 50th and final entry, we end with a law that is a masterpiece of self-aware absurdity and unintentional wisdom. In the town of Enterprise, Alabama, there stands a monument in the center of town square, and it's not dedicated to a war hero, a founding father, or a beloved leader. It's dedicated to an insect, specifically the boll weevil, a beetle that absolutely devastated the region's cotton crops in the early 1900s. After this pest destroyed their primary industry, local farmers were forced to diversify into other crops, particularly peanuts. which ended up making them far more prosperous than they had ever been growing cotton. In gratitude for the disaster that accidentally saved their economy, the town passed an ordinance protecting the monument and legally enshrining the town's appreciation for the very bug that ruined their original way of life. It is the only law in the world that celebrates a catastrophe, honors a pest, and proves that sometimes the worst thing that ever happened to you can become the best thing, if you're willing to adapt. So, in the end, these laws aren't just historical mistakes or bureaucratic accidents. They're a perfect, hilarious X-ray of the human condition. They prove that our logic is often just a thin veneer stretched over beautiful, chaotic absurdity. We're brilliant enough to build civilizations and stupid enough to make it illegal for fish to get drunk. We're sophisticated enough to create complex legal systems and ridiculous enough to regulate reincarnation and bagpipes as weapons of war. Which brings us to a much simpler, more immediate question, and I really want you to think about this one. What is the single dumbest, most pointless rule you're currently forced to follow in your daily life? Forget these historical laws for a second. I want to hear about your workplace policies, your school regulations, your HOA rules, the everyday bureaucratic nonsense that serves absolutely no purpose except wasting your time and testing your sanity. What rule in your life makes you feel like you're living in one of these stories? Expose the madness in the comments right now, because I guarantee your real-life experiences are just as absurd as anything we covered today. And if you believe the world needs more explorations of beautiful nonsense, more deep dives into the glorious chaos of human decision-making, then prove it. Hit that subscribe button, smash the notification bell, and let's keep documenting the spectacular stupidity that makes us human. Thanks for watching, and remember, somewhere right now, someone is writing a law that will make absolutely no sense to anyone 50 years from now. And honestly, that's kinda beautiful.